Hi. This little video is an opportunity for me to share some thoughts and reflections on the last year and a bit or so at St. Peter's. As you know, we haven't been able to have our normal annual vestry meeting where we would usually offer these opportunities for reflection and looking forward. So over the last few weeks, we've been gradually pushing out to the church membership different reports and reflections that don't take the place of the annual vestry meeting, because we're not having one this year, but do some of what we would have done at the annual meeting in a slightly different way. And I want to do that on video, so it's always nice to be a bit more face-to-face in as much as we're able to in this continued strange season. As I was thinking about this little talk and the last few months, a year and a bit or so at St. Peter's, I remembered the famous phrase, and I have no idea actually who said it, that goes something like this: everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think that's how a lot of us have felt about 2020. A lot of it has felt a bit like getting punched in the mouth. Of course, the big example of that is how the unpredicted, unprecedented impact of the lockdown, of the pandemic, and the knock-on effects of that, and how we have responded to that and continue to need to respond to that in different ways as individuals, as communities, and as a church. And for me personally as well, there have been different issues in my life that have made 2020 a challenging one, with my kidney failure in February and my slip disc later in the year. Both of those have had a significant impact on my life this year, none of which I could have predicted, none of which had anything to do with my more normal health issues, both of which I have recovered from now. But 2020 has, for me and for many of us, felt a bit like that punch in the mouth. And although I hold plans loosely by nature, and that can be both a weakness or sometimes a strength, it still felt a difficult year to navigate. But I do continue to be grateful for so much that is happening in our church community, grateful for what God is doing. I'm thankful for the people involved, for our wardens, Lance and Lynette, for Gail as the church secretary, for Charlie as our youth worker, for Tessa as our cleaner, for the whole church council, and so many more of you who I'm not going to name individually, because inevitably I'll, by omission, forget somebody. But so many of us have been involved in so many different ways. I'm so thankful to God for your faithful work and your faithful giving, your faithful prayers, and your faithful involvement in different aspects of St. Peter's life, even in this strange last year or so. I'm just going to offer a few reflections in no particular order about specific things that I've thought about as I've looked back at the last year and think about what may lie ahead for us. This is in no particular order. I've reflected on how Martin and Colleen have done a really good job of facilitating a discipleship course via Zoom on Friday evenings over the last few months, and I'm aware that for those involved, that's been a really significant time of growth and of discussion, of growth in discipleship following Jesus, and of growth in relationships with each other. And I'm excited to see how that group continues to grow, how the individuals within it continue to grow, and what builds out of it, hopefully, in the next year or so. And I'm really thankful for Martin and Colleen in their leadership of that. Like many of us, I'm also very thankful to God for the microsite and the opportunity to host around 10 or so homeless men who would otherwise have been on the streets, and many of us in the St. Peter's community were involved in that in a very hands-on way. And I'm so thankful that the council was willing to back that idea, and I'm thankful particularly for Richard Boland's vision in overseeing that and facilitating it. And it's been a very natural evolution, I think, of our well-established Thursday evening community suppers, and a really good use of our church building when we couldn't use it for worship at all, for public worship. It was a good way to use it for this different kind of worship, of serving these men and of growing together as a community in a different way. So thank you to God for all of you who were involved in that. And we continue to pray for that, the microsite and the community that they've established down in Musenberg. In a more general perspective, looking at that changing situation that we've been in, particularly over the past year, it's been really good for me to see how many of us have been willing to engage with the way we've had to do worship, our church services, in a different way for the last few months. Aware that most of us, it's not something we would naturally choose, but I'm so thankful that so many of us have been willing to give it a go and to explore this different way of worshipping, and have maybe connected with God in ways that have surprised us and encouraged us. Of course, it's not perfect, and of course, it could always have been better, and there are always things that we can improve on, as there is with anything that we do. But it does show us something important, that God works, even when life is difficult and when our lives seem disordered and disrupted, that there is something of God at work. And I'm thankful for the way we have, as a church community, found a way to worship, even in this strange and difficult season. One theme for me personally, and I think corporately, that I've been challenged about over the last year and a half, 2 years, is where we as individuals need to be more willing to ask each other for help. That's something I've touched on in our sermons a bit over the past few weeks, and I think it's something we really need to think about together, and how we can enable ourselves as a church community be one where it's okay to say, I don't have it all together, I'm struggling with this part of my life, whatever this part of my life is, whether it's a practical issue or a less tangible thing, whether it's to do with money, or whether it's to do with something you need done at the house, or whether it's something you're wrestling with in your mind. And then to reach out and ask people for help, and not to be ashamed of that, because we all need each other. That's what Paul's vision of the church as the body in 1 Corinthians is about. We need each other, and we need to say, hey, I'm a leg, but right now I need an arm, so please help me with this. And I want us to really think and pray and discern about how we can be a community where it's easier and less threatening, and we are more able to ask each other for specific help, and to try and find a way of facilitating that help from within our community if we possibly can. And not assuming perhaps that somebody else will be able to help with that need, but that maybe we can help that person with that need that we become aware of, or maybe we can step up to take their hand and to assist them with something, or point them in the direction of someone who can. Something for us to think about. One of the features of St. Peter's that people often reflect back to me that they really appreciate is that we're becoming and seek to become a church community where people are able to lay things down and to let go of stuff that they had taken on in the church without it being too burdensome, and without there being much guilt around that. And that's great, because I've seen so many churches over the years where people have got into roles in the church's life for long periods of time, and it's become bad for them, and it's become a burden to them, and it's become destructive for them, but they haven't felt able to lay it down because of guilt or fear or whatever it is. And I'm really pleased, actually, when people have said to me at different points over the years, I just can't keep going with this, I need to take a break. And I said, absolutely, because I always try to say to people in the church, in St. Peter's, if something is no longer a joy for you, if something is no longer giving you life to do it, then please feel free to talk to me about just putting it down. Because your health, your spiritual and your physical and your mental and your emotional well-being are more important than any one task in the life of the church. And I'm really excited, actually, really thankful when people feel able to do that. The reverse side of that, though, is sometimes we don't always follow through on our commitments, and we need to get that balance right. And I'm aware, and I'm very grateful to Charlie that he mentioned that in his report that he sent round. That, for instance, it became difficult for him to enable Sunday school during Sunday services for kids, even though he had worked quite hard with many of the parents to say, we will have Sunday school on this Sunday each month. And he felt he had buy-in and agreement from the parents and the kids, but so many of the parents and the kids, for whatever reasons, didn't show up. And there may well have been, in many of those cases, very good reasons why the parents and kids didn't show up on particular mornings. Of course, we know that happens, but that highlights just the importance of thinking through how we communicate things to each other, and how the actions that we take, or the actions that we don't take, actually have an impact on work that others have put in and things that others have done. And I do want us to be aware of that, and to start thinking that through as a church, while still holding on to this ability to say, I can't do this for now, so I need to let it go. And that's a tension we need to navigate together, and a balance we need to help each other strike. And I'd love us to give some thought to that. And just finally, one last thing that I think the last few weeks and months have highlighted for me that we need to give some thought to as a church community. And it's something that I've mentioned occasionally at different times and places over the years, but has really been sharpened for me in this strange year of 2020, is to do with St. Peter's unique status as an Anglican church that is not a normal Anglican church. Now, I won't go into the details of that now because that's not the place, but some of you will know that we are what's called an Anglican church that's in association with the rest of the Anglican church, and not a typical Anglican church, for all sorts of legal reasons. And some of you won't be aware of all that, or not have a full grasp of that. And I completely understand that. That's very natural, because when we get together for coffee or whatever, or chat with each other, the first topic of conversation is never going to be the legalities of St. Peter's church structure. It's not nobody's idea of a great time, really. But our legal structure and our church structure has a lot of implications for us that play out in different ways in the church's life. Some very good and positive things, but also some things that present challenges for us. And with the natural churn of church membership over the years, I'm aware that there are probably quite a few of us now at St. Peter's who don't have as full a grasp of what our legal status is and what it actually means for us as a church in many different ways. It affects our financial life as a church. It affects the way we do our services. It affects the way we deal with church employees, so cleaner, youth worker, secretary and rector, and any other employees we might have. And it affects how we deal with church property, the physical buildings that the church owns. And when I talk about this, I'm not meaning any criticism of anything or anybody. This isn't a critical negative thing. So please don't read it or hear it as that. But what I'm saying is I think, need to have some conversations within the church at council level and at other levels as well, at a broader level, that enable us to fully understand our status as a church and fully own and act on the realities of that status and the responsibilities and privileges that it gives us as a church. The 2020 pandemic has placed a huge burden on all of us, and in the context of church life, it has placed a particularly huge burden on the wardens and on myself as rector. And again, I'm not criticising anybody here. I'm just saying this year has highlighted the burdens that our unique structure places upon us as a church and us as individuals, particularly the wardens and also me as the rector. And we need to talk about that and to understand it properly and to act on it properly. And to have the courage to have discussions around it if we think we maybe need to change or shift some of our understandings or the way we do things, just to make sure we do things even better next time when something like this happens, or when whatever the future throws something at us, and that we are aware of our responsibilities that we have given our unusual legal status, what our responsibilities and privileges are as a church. I hope that makes sense. Please feel free to chat about it with me or with the wardens. You'll know I'm going on my sabbatical leave from Monday next week for 6 weeks, but happy to chat with you about that after my sabbatical leave if you'd like to do so. But for now, just think about it. And if you don't have a copy of the church's constitution, for instance, and the deeds of association and so on, maybe get in touch with the wardens and ask for one, and start to think and reflect and throw around some questions, and maybe it's something we'll be able to dive into in different ways in 2021. As I said, I'm really thankful to God for all of you at St. Peter's, for all you give to the work here for God's glory, for the faithful prayers and worship, for your desire to follow Jesus in all the different areas of your lives, for the way we've responded to so many challenges together over the 10 or so years that I've been here, as we look forward to the future together. I'm thankful for each and every one of you, and for your role in the church community and in my life and in my family's life as well. And I'm excited for what God will do with us in the future. 2021 lies open before us, nearly. And as we had at this time last year, we had no idea what lies ahead of us in that year. But we know that God will continue to be faithful because he always is faithful. And he will continue to be at work because he's always at work. And he invites us, as he always does, to rely on that faithfulness and to join in with his work and see the fruit that he brings, both now in the relatively short term, and to see from the perspective of eternity the eternal fruit that he will bring that we could never dream of, but that only he can enable. So thank you, and may the Lord bless you and keep you and be gracious to you and make his face to shine upon you and grant you his peace this day and always.